Hi everyone, I'm Dale Smith, aka Journo Dale, and we're here to talk about Canadian politics. Something that kind of flew under the radar this week was an appearance by the new Pay Equity Commissioner at the Status of Women Committee. And I thought it might be interesting to dig into that a little bit because it's not something that we've had a lot of chance to talk about really in much detail anywhere really in the milieu. So in 2018, the government passed a proactive pay equity legislation. So that means that under federally regulated businesses, which is about 6% of all workplaces in Canada, uh, employers are required to proactively submit pay equity plans to this commissioner that has been established within the Human Rights Commission. And they need to essentially have plans to eliminate pay equity issues. And this is a little easier said than done because we have had ongoing litigation for decades in some cases with some of these cases. And what that essentially means is a lot of it is around the notion of work of equal value for getting equal pay. And so it's not just that women in the same position would be paid less, but it's more that women in equivalent positions are not being paid the same as men in equivalent positions, even though the positions are slightly different. So one of the classic examples is librarians are a more female-dominated field, and archivists were seen as a more male-dominated field, and archivists were being paid more than librarians, even though there's a lot of crossover in terms of skills, and this is kind of the work of equal value portion of it. So these are the kinds of things that this commissioner is looking to take care of, at least for federally regulated industries. And what I thought was interesting, what we heard this week is at committee, she said it's going to be up to 3 years before most of these raises start being seen for the people for whom this piece of legislation affects. And I thought that was kind of interesting because there's this kind of notion that why isn't this being able to happen overnight? And part of it is that there is a certain amount of negotiation that still needs to take place in terms of how to phase it in. And one of the things that she said that I thought was kind of interesting was they're also trying to be cognizant of the fact that the pandemic and the economic shock as a result of that is making it tougher on some employers. So they want to give them a phase-in period, which is all well and good, but it does seem to kind of fly in the face of the whole notion of why we have this legislation in the first place. But I thought it was useful to at least highlight this. The other thing is that I think there's still going to be a certain amount of negotiation and possibly some kind of arbitration in terms of what are the cases that are still being considered as unequal in terms of work of equal value. And I think that this is one of those fairly difficult problems, which is why we've had decades-long litigation in some cases. One of them is Canada Post, which, heavily unionized workplace and so on, but there's a huge disparity between what rural and urban positions are being paid, whereas the rural ones are seen as more female dominated for postmasters who are in a different union than the urban male sorters, collectors, carriers, so on and so on. And this has been ongoing for so long that it seems almost an intractable problem. Never mind that the Canada Post keeps losing these court cases. So these are the kinds of things that are being looked at, that are being taken care of, and now that we have this commissioner who's able to be a little put a bit more attention on this rather than having to simply deal with litigation, and the fact that the federal legislation is proactive puts the onus on the employers that they need to come up with plans. They need to ensure that they are doing the work to ensure that there is equity within the pay structures for these different positions. So anyway, I just thought that was kind of interesting to highlight over the course of this week. This is one of these things that, you know, the Liberals like to pat themselves on the back for in terms of being a feminist government and so on. And this was, you could probably say, a certain amount of a success for them in getting this legislation through. They've established this office now. They've got a commissioner in place. She is doing the work. But it's also one of these kinds of reminders that these kinds of structural changes can take time. And even when you do have the systems in place to deal with inequality and inequity, it still takes time to get everything worked through the system. And yeah, so I thought this was kind of interesting and something that we should, you know, we shouldn't take our eyes off of. This is something that they promised they'd deal with. And now we've got a bit more concrete information and timelines and so on. So it helps us to hold the government to account for the things that they've promised and the progress that is made on those. And that is everything for this week. Join us again next week for some more Canadian politics. I'm Dale Smith. That's at journo_Dale on Twitter. And don't forget to like the video, share, subscribe, and support us on Patreon. Thanks, everyone.